Yo gamers, Nature here. Today we're going to go over the recent update for Melee Hunters and WoW Classic Season of Discovery. We'll provide a full guide and go over the update and recent nerf gear, spec, talents, runes, pet, and even professions. Now, just make sure you mash the like and subscribe button. It really helps. Now, first things first, let's go over the recent nerf. Dual wield specialization no longer grants a 30% damage bonus to Raptor Strike for wielding two weapons of the same type. This is big because we no longer are basically forced into using two weapons of the same type. However, this is technically a 10 to 12% DPS loss, but keep in mind some of us are looking for those fist weapons out of Nomergon, and maybe we get lucky, we get the first epic item and we're forced to offhand like a sword or axe. So this may not feel as bad for you, but this is overall a DPS loss of about 10 to 12%. Now, I will also point out a couple of encounters had their armor reduced, and for melee players, it will increase your damage by about 10%. Although this is a couple of encounters, this kind of does balance out the scale on those fights. Second, Raptor Strike damage when the melee specialist rune is active is now normalized weapon damage. Now, I get a lot of questions, and what does that mean? Basically, what this means is the attack speed on your weapon is no longer factored into the damage of your Raptor Strike. So it's all normalized to the same attack speed. Basically, a dagger is going to be considered 1.7 attack speed. Even if the dagger is different, it'll be considered 1.7, which makes daggers kind of bad because we want a slower attack speed for Raptor Strike. Now, any other one-hander is actually going to be considered 2.4 attack speed. So every other one-hander you have is going to be considered 2.4. So a slower weapon, let's say, for example, the Warsong Revered Sword, that sword is 2.7 base attack speed. So it's actually going to be normalized down to 2.4 when you do your Raptor Strike, meaning it's going to be a nerf and do a little bit less damage. However, a different sword like Sword of the Omen, which starts off at 1.9 attack speed, is going to be normalized up to the 2.4 when you use your Raptor Strike and actually hit harder than what it used to do. So basically, all you're going to do here is look at the weapon damage and DPS, and you're not going to look at the attack speed. As a side note, a two-hander is going to be normalized to 3.3 attack speed, so it'll have the same effect on two-handers as well. Now, let's go over professions. This phase, it's really a toss-up. You'll either go with enchanting and leatherworking, or you'll stick with engineering and leatherworking from last phase. Leatherworking is number one on the list since it provides you with neural-linked cow. However, coming in number two, it's either going to be enchanting or leatherworking. Enchanting is your best in slot on single target, while engineering is actually your best in overall damage throughout the instance. So if you're trying to do like a speed run or go for an overall damage, engineering is the way. But if you're trying to single target parse, enchanting is the way. Now, basically, as an enchanter, you would use the easy throw version of the bombs that you can purchase on the auction house. Plus, you also have the new enchanted sigil of innovation for a static 20 attack power buff. Now, a lot of hunters did roll engineering in phase one. So if you did that and you're asking, well, how close is engineering on single target and is it worth it? Well, engineering's pretty close. It's about 10 DPS difference. However, if you craft the epic belt and once every 30 minutes on that fight, that belt's going to do a little bit more damage as well for single target. But engineering really is going to shine in overall because you can use the better version of your bombs and you have a little bit more utility. So I really think it's a toss-up here. And let's not forget, for the most part, Season of Discovery is just fun and fairly easy content. So whatever your preference here, even if it's not one of these three professions, should be perfectly fine. Now, we touched base on a couple of items in professions, so let's go over the gear. On Helm, we have the glowing neural-linked cow. Keep in mind that this is the leather crafted item from leatherworking. The mail item is less damage. If you did not do leatherworking, Marksman's Scope Visor is the next best item, and it's about 18 DPS difference. For neck, we have Nomergon Peace Officer's Torque. On shoulders, Trog Slayer Pauldrons. On cloak, we have Prototype Parachute Cloak. This is just also clutch if you're doing speedrun, since it allows you to do the easy jump down similar to the engineering parachute cloak, but with more agility. Now with chest, we enter into the set pieces here. There's 2 routes we can go. We can get the Blazewind breastplate, then pick up the tier legs and boots. So this is the easier path to go. Or we can go with the tier chest and legs and grab Blackforge greaves. This is a little bit more difficult to obtain, or it costs a little bit more gold, for example, but it is about 1 DPS better than the Blazewind breastplate original choice. Now, both combos are fine here. Now, when it comes to the chest or the boots, as a side note here, for the gold farmers, these greaves have a 1.2% drop chance and drop off the Vile Branch Axe Throwers in the hinterlands and are a decent gold farm because they sell for about 50 to 70 gold easily right now. On bracers, we want Forest Stalkers bracers for getting Warsong Exalted. Since this isn't an easy task to do, you can also pick up experimental aim stabilizers. These are literally about 1 DPS off from each other. On gloves, we want Bach Maestro's handguards as our best in slot. Fair warning here, this is only our best in slot once we do have both fist weapons from Nomergon. So if we do not have those, Machinist gloves is technically our second best in slot on any mechanical fight, while Gloves of the Holy Might would be better on non-mechanical fights. So for gloves, I just want to point out Machinist gloves are best in slot for other classes that don't want to get the double fist weapons like we do. So I would actually pass on these. However, only in return for them giving you the same courtesy and passing on Bonk Maestros for you if they were to drop. Then, to be honest, Void Touch leather gloves from Phase 1 are only a couple of DPS behind the Gloves of Holy Might, so it's pretty easy to just stick with those until you do get those upgrades coming in. On Girdle, we'll either go Hyperconductive Gold Wrap for Engineers or Dark Vision Girdle. They both do about the same amount of damage in DPS. It's really a coin flip here, but the Engineering Belt has an on use that does give it the edge. We already went over legs and boots, so jump back up to the chest part of the conversation if you want to go over those. On ring, we want the Honored Warsong Rep Ring, which is Legionnaire's band for Horde and Protector's band for the Alliance. Iron Spine's Eye is technically our second BIS, while the Epic Hypercharge Gear of Devastation, that the Epic Ring from Nomergon, is right behind it. And then a couple other options. We have Ring of the Underworld as a BOE. And it's just about 1 DPS less. On Trinket, we want Gyromatic Experiment 420B, and that's from the last boss, Mechanier Thermoplug, and Avenger's Void Pearl, which was the last item off of Akamai and BFD. As a side note, since hunters are melee, try to grab the Battle Chicken if you can. This can be actually popped before an encounter, then you can switch back to your original trinket to add a little bit more DPS, and it does have a chance to get a buff called Squawk, which is a 5% haste buff as well for increased damage. So the Battle Chicken is definitely a pickup if you can get it. When it comes to the weapons, we want Mechatorx, Arcano Shredder, and Cogmaster's Claw. There really isn't a way around these two, since the combo for the gloves is going to give you the best DPS. With that being said, your weapons are obviously the single biggest DPS jump of any item. It's about 40 DPS over the swords, so we want to do anything we can do to get an edge on these for sure. Lastly, on range, we have Bloodlash Bow for the 50 strength proc, while we can use Thermoplug's Custom Blaster for range DPS as needed. Here's a quick look at a couple of items that are second best in slot, or like an honorable mention, meaning they're very close as well, and could be useful in PvP or PvE. As a side note, you can also down rank your PvP Warsong Rep Ring, and you can pick up the 6 Agi 6 Strength Ring and use that with the higher rank as well. And you can grab with your Warsong Rep a 38 level bow, which is great for pre-raid BIS as well. Ever since the update, I think the number one question I've been getting is what's the best talent build to run? Basically, is survival dead or is beast mastery king? Well, let's dissect it here. First, let's start off with the weakest spec of the three options just to give you an idea. This is only about 20 DPS behind the second best build that we'll cover next. We have a pure survival build here while running Aspect of the Lion with a pet. We'll grab 3 out of 3 monster slaying, 3 out of 3 humanoid slaying, 2 out of 2 raptor strikes deterrence, 3 out of 3 sure-footed, 3 out of 3 killer instinct, lightning reflexes for the extra 15% agility, and 5 out of 5 on that. Now with this build, it's important to note the rest of the talents here are really optional. They won't affect your DPS at all or dramatically, but some hunters pick up PvP options like entrapment, improve wing clap, wyvern sting, and counterattack. I personally use the option on the left here. This gives me better traps for more damage on average on trash pulls for kind of like overall damage or for speed running. However, the build on the right is going to be a great build for single target DPS and parsing on boss encounters. When it comes to the runes, we'll run Aspect of the Lion, Melee Specialist, Dual Wield Specialization, Flanking Strike, and in this build, Beast Mastery rune is now better than Carve, so we'll switch it up and run the BM rune. The next build we'll cover is very similar. We are going to run the exact same talents. However, this build is about 20% damage increase over the first build we covered, but it's about 20 DPS behind the last build, which we'll cover next. However, we will switch it up and run Lone Wolf in Carve instead of Aspect of the Lion in BM rune. Now, the trick with this build is having another hunter or paladin in the raid that provides you with kings or lion buff. You must have a 10% to all stats already in order to run this as a better option for survival. To be honest, this is my favorite option. It's basically us hunters role playing as a warrior or a rogue and having a little bit of fun just for the phase. But if it's not your style here, I suggest the last build. The last build is actually going to move us over into Beast Mastery. Now, again, this is about 20 DPS over the last build, the number 2 build we went over, and about 40 DPS over the number 1 build, the first build we went over. That makes this build really good. There might be times for PvP or farming or even certain encounters in Nomergon where you want to switch to range DPS. This build is the best that allows you to switch to range optimally and way better than the survival builds that we already went over. Now, first things first, we'll grab 5 out of 5 into Improved Hawk, 3 out of 5 Endurance Training, 2 out of 2 Revive Pet, 5 out of 5 Unleashed Fury, 5 out of 5 Ferocity, Intimidation, 2 out of 2 Bestial Discipline, 5 out of 5 Frenzy, and 1 out of 1 into Intimidation. Now, you'll have 2 extra points. Oh, actually, I apologize. Not 1 out of 1 Intimidation, 1 out of 1 into Bestial Wrath. You'll have 2 extra points in the beginning of your build that don't really matter, and you could put whatever you see best. A lot of PvPers will go 1 point into Bestial Swiftness, while in PvE, it may be like a speed run, you might put 2 out of 2 Pathfinding, but you really can't go wrong here. It's just your judgment. When it comes to the runes, we'll run Aspect of the Lion, Melee Specialist, Dual Wield Specialization, Flanking Strike, and Beast Mastery rune. So since we just went over the best build, which is Beast Mastery, there's no better time than to touch base on your pets. Well, Wind Serpent is back, you guys. Now, it comes to a perfect game timing and what's going on with the Wind Serpent, but right now, a cat is actually about 5 DPS over a Wind Serpent, and you'd want a 2.0 attack speed cat to maximize your flanking strike. Now, when it comes to the Wind Serpent, you're going to start seeing it pop up on the damage meter. And the reason why is when we do that Beast Mastery build and maximize all the multipliers, your Wind Serpent does have a ranged advantage. And what that means is because Lightning Breath is a ranged ability, you can actually then get it in a little bit quicker on a lot of encounters, which can give that pet the edge, especially on the quicker fights. Now, for the Wind Serpent, you want to pick up your Dive rank 1, which is new for the phase, and you'll want to make sure you have the lightning breath. But for cat, we can actually get an upgraded rank 6 of claw and bite and have rank 2 of dash. Again, both these pets are great. Cat's about 5 more DPS right now. However, wind serpents are going to win on quick encounters because they can engage a little bit quicker. This is such a toss up here. I think it's just, to be honest, your preference or whatever you want to use. Both are completely viable. Now, lastly, when it comes to hunter, we'll want to go over your rotation. With melee hunters, this is going to look and feel a lot different than your range rotations. We use what's called a priority rotation system. What that means is we rank each skill in order, and if it's off cooldown, we prioritize what is at the top of the list. Then we would only skip that ability if it's on cooldown and just go down to the next ability, so on and so forth. Now, the order here is number 1 is Raptor Strike. Yes, we want to do Raptor Strike as top priority, even over Flanking Strike, because it's just that good. Then we'll use Flanking Strike if it's up. Then if we did spec into the survival lone wolf build and we're using Carve, we'll want to use Carve. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If we have multi-shot off cooldown and there are other mobs that are at range, we would actually weave in a multi-shot at the range, because this would actually utilize and do more damage. Now, lastly, we'll then use Wing Clip. And I get a lot of questions about Wing Clip, like, is it even worth it because it's so little damage? Well, keep in mind, Wing Clip can proc Wild Strikes or Wind Fury Totem. So this is why we would use this if everything else above is either off CD or not viable, because we can't use it in the scenario. Now, with that being said, make sure we do not use any type of oil or sharpening stone on our main hand, because it will cancel out your Wild Strikes or Wind Fury Totem and will drastically decrease your damage. Now, as far as your offhand goes, Shadow Oil is technically the best in slot to use. However, another option like Sharpening Stone is a lot cheaper and is very close. It's less than 1 DPS different. Now, all right, that's all I had to cover today. Make sure you mash the like and subscribe. And if you're really enjoying the content and feel like a croc, join the Croc Nation membership below. Until next time, peace.